Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Ransom. Thank you so much for being here. I'm personally thrilled to be here and welcome you all to the day one of Inc. Founders House. This is exciting stuff. We come to Austin every year, basically, because it's an opportunity to meet entrepreneurs and small business owners in real life. It's an opportunity for us to meet you in real life. It's also an opportunity for you all to meet each other. So we want to build community. Morgan Brady's hanging around back here. Go find her. She's a redhead. She just waved her head. Yay, Morgan. So we want to build community, and the best way to do that is to have you all meet each other. And so we're really thrilled about that. We are also here to celebrate female founders today in particular because it's International Women's Day. Hell yeah. So we have an incredible lineup of different panels and panelists. Let me just name these fabulous women here. We have Kate Luzio, who's the CEO and founder of Luminary. Sunira Madani, who has founded two companies, Stacks and Worth AI, and Cody Sanchez of Contrarian Thinking. I'm thrilled to be here with you all and in awe of you, frankly. And then beyond that, just a couple more housekeeping notes. We are about to unveil our female founders list next week, and we're super thrilled. And I have it on good authority that some of you sitting in this very, I guess it's not really a room, it's like outside, but some of you sitting here today are actually on the list. So we're thrilled about it. Check it out. It's going to be great. And Kate, we have something else fun planned later. Yes?
We do. We have a female founders meetup later today, right here in this room. The amazing part is we had over 300 of you register for 30 minutes. So get here early for the panel before, and we are going to do some fun meeting up and hopefully celebrating some of you that will be on the list.
It's great. So let's dig in. As we've written at Inc., we are talking about the female founders issue. We talk about this quote unquote founder boom, female founder boom that's been happening. So for the last couple of years, women have actually been starting up companies at almost twice the rate of men. And women of color, frankly, are starting them up even faster. So hell yeah, good job. So Kate, I was hoping you could sort of kick us off. Give us a sense for what's behind the boom.
So number one, we saw, obviously, so many women leave the workforce during the pandemic, but we saw the rising numbers of women starting companies before the pandemic. I love how everyone gives the pandemic credit for everything. But because you've had return to work, you have companies saying, I want 5 days a week, flexibility, and not providing flexibility, women are like, I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're seeing a lot of that, women that aren't re-entering as fast as they wanted to, a lot of them taking breaks and aren't finding the natural path back in. Also, when you look at the number of women, they want to control their own destiny. And to what Rebecca and Allie were talking about, that's why we're seeing over 70% of them bootstrap, or stiletto strap, as I like to call it, because it's harder.
Like, we're going to talk about bootstrapping at some point. And of course she brought it up. So Sunira, you not only have started two companies, you also mentor female founders. You work with them through the Millionaire Founder School and the CEO School. Kudos to you for doing that, paying it forward like that. But what are you seeing among the women you're talking to? Like, what's behind it?
I think women, we are ambitious. We are multi-passionate. Just as, we have everything that it takes to be natural-born entrepreneurs. Like, that is who we are. We want to solve problems. One of the things that I see, yes, the numbers are there that we're starting businesses, but where there are a lot of gaps, and I know we're going to talk about the gaps, but it's in the number of women scaling businesses. Right? And so starting businesses is one thing, but still, I hope these stats are different, and I'm sure Diana's going to fact check me here in a second, but still less than 2% of female founders are breaking $1 million in revenue. We have a huge gap in venture capital, so we're talking about that, but if we're not even getting to $1 million in revenue, we're not going to get venture funding either. And so it is incredible that we're starting businesses, but I think now the conversation needs to shift into scaling businesses. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I would say my conversations are, that's the conversations that we're having in these rooms is, what's stopping us from scale? What can we do to really take more risks, be more bold? But I do think it's natural. We are natural born entrepreneurs. And if you look at all of like every stats of investors and women run companies, companies that are led by women are the most profitable. Companies that are led by women are like the greatest investments in portfolio companies. And so we're doing a great job. And so that's, we just have to showcase and highlight more of these stories. We got to get funding to women, but we also have to take control and say we want to build big businesses. So I'm here for the next stage of like big business energy.
Yeah. So Cody, switching gears like slightly here, you have largely advocated buying up kind of like Main Street businesses. And I think it's fascinating. There's like this untapped resource. It's like HVAC businesses and, things that might be like untechified, if you will. So from your view, you probably would suggest that maybe we are at a female founder boom, but we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's two things I want to highlight. First, I want to nail one point you said too, which is allocation of capital. So I don't think that there's some, gross conspiracy out there where people don't want to fund women. That's not the case in my mind. I think we have to stop the men versus women thing. And instead we have to go, hey, I kind of like hanging out with chicks better than I do dudes because I'm a chick. And so we have personal bias. Men have that same thing. It's called the 19th hole. They hang out at the golf course and they all do deals in the 19th hole. Not because they hate women, because that's who they hang out with. And also, I'm married. If my hubs was hanging out with chicks all the time, I'd be like, thing is, that's going to work for me. So we have a venture capital fund that we don't say that we focus on women or men, but we are one of the very few female-run venture capital funds. And we had the #1 vintage venture capital fund in 2022, which is wild. On all of AngelList, #1 performing fund. We just launched a $100 million fund for exactly the reason you're talking about. We're not going to talk about our vaginas, but we are going to fund a fuck ton of women who are building really big companies.
Hell yeah.
And that, I think, is the next stage for us. So if we build a $1 billion business like she has, then we have to do what the guys do, which is they fund all of their friends' companies.
Exactly.
We have to do that. We actually don't do that right now as women. And so I think we got to PayPal mafia it. If you look at that, you guys ever seen that shit?
Absolutely.
You look at like the network of all those guys who started that business. Yeah, that needs to be us. And I think we can do it, but we got to be the ones to allocate capital. The second point I would make is the richest people in the world, they're not venture capitalists. They're private equity guys. And, you sold a company to them.
Yeah, exactly.
How much have they grown that company since you bought it?
Not in growth, but in profitability.
But in profitability a lot. Okay, so the point of my point, and the beautiful question that you asked was, I think we have to obsess on cash flow, not just title, which we have because we didn't have titles for a while. Now we got to focus on profitable businesses that scale because then we can invest in others, and that is how we actually get more power is cash, not title.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
But do we really need venture funding for this? Like, can we scale a business any other way?
Stiletto strap, luminary.
Right.
So we started 6 years ago, and we've acquired 3 companies in 4 years. We've got members in 30 countries. We have over 15,000, actually now 18,000 members, and 65% of our revenue comes from our B2B model. Right, so I think the word scale has also been completely distorted. One, for a solopreneur, hiring their first employee could be scaling. To what Sanira is saying, scaling to build billion-dollar businesses. But there's a lot in between the hiring my first employee to a billion-dollar business. And so I think we also have to get rid of this, everyone else is doing something that I need to do, and run your own fucking race. Because that is what you are building. Everyone told me to raise money 7 years ago when I wrote the business plan, but also that if you don't raise money, you're going to fail. Well, I can count on my hands the number of that have failed in our category, and that is not a good thing, by the way. The fact that the Wing and the Riveter and others have failed and they're no longer here is not a good thing for our category, for women's networks, because then you won't get more funding. You won't get people to believe in the model. So when we say we want to put our competitors out of business, don't do it. That's why Walmart and Amazon still exist together. And you can still build a business and scale it. Just do it the way that makes sense for you, and don't do it by going in debt.
I love that. I'm going to add a different perspective because I have raised a shit ton of fucking venture capital. Yeah. So in my last company, I didn't even know what venture capital was when I started the first company, but I think there's not all kinds of businesses are set out for investors. So when we talk about scale, I like this conversation about scale than it is about money and venture. And I think that there are these vanity metrics, and you and I were talking about that backstage of these vanity metrics of how much founders have raised, or these are the amounts. But it's every business is different. You have to look at what your business needs are, and what Cody said, it's cash flow. Cash flow is more important than your mother. Like that is the most important
every day
in your business, and it's opportunity, right? So you're like, what is the next move that I have to make in my business for it to not just survive, but to thrive and get to the next day? And what are our goals? And it's so much execution that goes into it. So you're totally right of like, it's not the first employee. Scale is 10 years of everyday execution. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't because I had, of course, my style of business, which was a SaaS tech company, required venture capital to scale. Now, I also have other businesses. I have a portfolio of businesses, and I actually think that some of my favorite businesses are the unsexy businesses that produce incredible cash flow for our family office. And these businesses are not venture backed. Can I go raise capital? Absolutely. I do that for my tech companies, but you have to look at what's right for your business. And exactly what you said, stop focusing on the vanity or what other people are doing. And I think for women, I think this is an opportunity. We're not getting funded. We don't need it, right? And there are businesses that might need it. And what's going to drive venture capital or investment or strategic partnerships is your business succeeding. So we have to focus on building an incredible business, right? You don't need a pitch deck for an incredible business that everyone will want to invest. Everybody will want to partner. And that comes from revenue. So revenue solves all problems. And I think as women, we get tied up with the vanity stuff, and it's not, we're perfectionists, we put everything out with our heart, but it slows us down. So speed is a huge part of execution, and moving the needle every day is so critical. And I think that's where we have to focus on what is the next move that we have to make, and whatever that funding looks like, it doesn't have to be, it could look in all kinds of form. And I actually don't think all debt capital is bad either. I've raised debt.
No, debt is not a bad thing. Yeah. Good debt is good debt. There's such a thing as bad debt. And I would just say, I'll add the cash flow piece. I speak to so many founders at Luminary. I'm like, what is your cash position? Yeah. They're like, oh, I don't like to look at, I'm like, look at your bank account every day. I look at Luminary's bank account every day. I just want to know what's coming in, what's going out. And if you're not building a profitable company, it is going to be very hard. If you are desiring an exit, investors are getting much smarter. They're not just funding growth, they're funding they're buying profitable companies.
And what about for Main Street businesses? How do they access capital?
Yeah, well, right now, we're sitting in an AI revolution, right? I'm sure you guys are sitting on 57 panels listening to that. And you know what I know for sure about AI? It's going to take over our graphic design, our copywriting, our online businesses, our SaaS before it touches my fucking plumbing companies. And so I think one of the sexy things about Main Street is actually that it is going to take longer for tech intervention to happen, which means that the actual power scales have flipped for the first time ever. I mean, if you guys aren't on X kind of watching this, you can see in real time people building companies, solopreneur AI companies, at a speed of which we've never seen before, with $0 and a $200 budget for AI a month. So if that is the future, guess what we are in? We're in an asset ownership race. And by an asset ownership race, I mean that truthfully. I mean, we are going to want things that are actually limited and scarce as opposed to completely abundant. I would rather own the power and data centers for the AI companies that needs to use them as opposed to the next realm of AI companies. I don't want to compete with Sam Altman and Elon Musk. Amazon has never shut a data center in its entire history of being a business. That's what I want to own. I also want to own the corner store. I also want to own the laundromat because there's a thing called the Lindy effect, which is the longer something's been in existence, the more likely it will continue to be in existence. So I think the power imbalance has actually flipped back to the fucking plumbers.
Mm-hmm. And what are the businesses that you would not start?
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting in one right now. Sorry, owners of this place. Restaurants are really hard businesses. So there's lots of businesses. We call it a 10-step scale. So you can have a level 10 business and a level 1 entrepreneur and still win. Like, you're not that great of an entrepreneur, but you have a great fucking business. You can have a level 10 entrepreneur, but a level 1 business, and it's really hard to win. And so I do think the question to ask yourself is, where have we seen a prior history of performance? Because the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And so you just want to look at, in every single industry, what are the margins on the business, for how long, what's their success rate over time, and then use that to future cast yourself into that business. Restaurants would be one I don't love. I love to eat it, I'm sorry, but they're hard to run.
Yeah, they are. They're tough. And it's a cash issue all the time.
I would also like to offer a different perspective here because I really want to encourage. I'm building a second company, which is absolutely crazy, in tech, in SaaS, in AI. And I do think that there is innovation. I think it's and I don't want to compete against Sam Altman, so I totally agree with that. But I want women to also think about where we can offer different perspectives. So even in software, so everyone starting a company right now, there's so much opportunity, there is a lot of opportunity in AI, which means that 99% of it will all fail. And I will say that when you're in a sea of the same stuff, it's like it's so difficult because everything looks the same. But there are even still today, when I go to a tech conference, when I go to an event, there's not a lot of women in tech. There's not a lot of women in fintech. There's not a lot of women in health tech. There's not a lot of women in these industries. Each of you, and wherever you are in your career, in your business, I do want to encourage you to think about what is that technology angle that you can also bring to the table, because tech is really scalable. And so I like tech businesses because it is, for me, we can go get 1,000 customers tomorrow once I unlock something, versus in retail businesses, cash flow is there, but you can't open up 15 plumbing, service companies immediately. And so there are different kinds of businesses, and I do want to offer that perspective. I would love to see women grab this because by the horns, there's so much opportunity. And our differentiated perspective in it is needed. And it'll stand out just because it's different, just because it's coming from our lens and these guys are not thinking about it. It is still such a bros world in every room that I'm in for tech, for AI, for fintech. And I really think that there's an opportunity in whether you're in beauty, whether you're in a product-based company, how can you not just leverage it? I think it's important to learn about it so that we can scale faster, because I think some of these tools, we're gonna get left behind if we don't learn it.
Yeah.
But I would want you to think about if you're a new founder, what are these angles that you can come in, be disruptive, and your voice, because it's different, is disruptive in and of its own because it just doesn't exist right now.
Right. So why aren't more women involved in tech? Is it because women tend to be, quote unquote, risk averse?
No, women are not risk averse. If you look at the numbers of women starting,
I knew that would get her. Get her dander up.
Being an entrepreneur is the biggest risk of your life.
Yeah.
And if 70+% are self-funding, it's even a bigger risk. So I think we've got to also bust this myth that women are risk averse. I think if you are building a tech company, right, and we know that's where you need more capital, to Sunira's point, then we need more access to capital, right? But you've got to build the right business model. You've got to build the right profitability metrics. You've got to build the right customer product market fit, all of that. And I think to Rebecca's point earlier, and she and I spent a lot of time talking about this, there are a lot of people building beauty, wellness, health, apparel. That's fabulous. And most of those are coming from women. But we need women to step into the unsexy businesses and say, I'm going to go build this. I'm going to go into real estate. I'm going to go into HVAC. I'm going to go into roofing. I'm going to go into things that are needed in this world, infrastructure, and tech, to Sunira's point. But I do think that that's a bigger question around why women are skewing towards those types of products versus the big tech.
Can I add one thing too, like something we could take away from this, which is maybe a slightly controversial. I wouldn't lead with the fact that you're a woman when you're pitching.
Agreed.
So if you are going to a women investing venture fund that invests in women, awesome. Talk about it. Make the deck pink. Who fucking cares? For everybody else, the movement's over. They don't want to hear that we're not getting funded. They're dudes that have all the capital. We have to play by rules to get the money from the dudes that have capital. And I wish somebody had told me this earlier, because it's not that PC to say. But we have to go in there, and we need to not expect anything as a woman. We need to say, this problem is really hard. I have lived the pain of this problem for a long time. You're lucky to get me to found this company. I'm going to use my blood, sweats, and tears to cover it. And I also happen to have a beautiful rack. And like, but that's unrelated almost. And then the only other thing I'd say is we do need to ask ourselves the true question that they've both said, which is like, what do you want? I mean, we have a SaaS marketplace that we're building, and we're trying to take over what would be like Zillow, but for small businesses. And it's hard. Yeah. You have to be an absolute animal if you're gonna compete in tech and SaaS. Yes. And because your marketplace and competition is everybody, anybody with a computer. If I'm in Duluth and a tiny little town and I have the only laundromat, I don't have to be a top level competitor. So those are the only two hard truths I would say. We are capable of it. Women are incredibly powerful and can do this, but let's be honest about what it takes, which is we can't lead with the fact that we're women. That's not going to get us funded. And secondly, that it's really hard. So are we positive we want to do it? And if you can, then you can have $1 billion company.
But it also takes confidence. Yeah. Sunira, we were talking about this backstage too. Like, you need to walk in there like you own the.
I want to echo everything these two women have said. And when you ask the question of why aren't women in tech, it's what Cody said earlier. It's because we're not on the golf course. So we just do what we know. Right, so we're like, we want to be entrepreneurs, and it makes sense. We're like, oh, here's a beauty product. My friend has a beauty brand. We're in these conferences, so these ideas are sparking, which is incredible. We need to get in different rooms, and we are so uncomfortable in getting in different rooms, and that is what's going to change the game. Is we have to put ourselves in these rooms to have these conversations. I was talking to Diana backstage about how incestuous the tech community is, especially, and then it gets nicher, like the fintech community. I raised capital in my sleep this last time around. I like shot out a few text messages. It's the same group of guys. If one person does the deal, they all do the deal. When I go to a fintech conference, if I get one of these customers, now I have every bank that has a customer because that person has, it's literally the pool of who you know. And so why we're not in these rooms is because we need more women. It's gonna take all of us to like, it's gonna take women like me to go build tech companies, to invite you to say, let's think about this different, to bring you to the next fintech conference so that we can spark these ideas. And so I do think that that's why we're not in these rooms, is because it's comfort, right? And it makes sense.
So I 100% agree. Coming from 20 years in finance, right? I was surrounded by men at all times. And by the way, that was great. It's great. No, it was great because I learned so much, and I learned how they interacted and how they, managed their business dealings, et cetera. But it's one of the reasons why when we launched Luminary, it has been gender inclusive since day one. I don't want to just be surrounded by women. I love all of you.
I like that.
Sassy, I love you. But we need everyone in the room so that we can teach and educate and inform other genders that, by the way, this is what's happening, this is what I'm building, and then you convince them. It's also very important as we head into whatever the society we're in today, that we are still being inclusive, we're still focusing on diversity, we're still focusing on equity. I don't care what the president says. That is important to this world. But by doing it in a way where we are all represented and we're talking to each other, we're opening up dialogue, we're talking to the guys, we're shooting off those texts, that is what's gonna fucking change the game for us as women. Make no mistake, we need the men, we need them as allies and stakeholders in our businesses. So if you are only surrounding yourself by women founders, you are going to be very lonely.
So speaking of Donald,
sorry, I know that's a little controversial, but it's the truth.
No, it's great. Thank you for sharing. Speaking of Donald Trump a little bit,
oh Lord,
we only have 2 minutes left. So obviously this is like a lot to talk about. So I'm not going to ask you a lot about it, but let's try to be optimistic. Name one thing that you're hopeful for in the future, near future.
Oh, I'm excited for more IPOs. Like, I think that when we have markets are booming, when we're winning, financially, everything is easier. And so we'll get more, like everything, there's a trickle effect when the economy does better, when the markets do better. I'm hoping for, it's been, especially in venture and I still have a really large stake in stocks, so I'm like really hoping for a really nice strategic that's about to happen. Hopefully. But I do think that when the markets are performing, so I'm looking forward to seeing some of these large tech players that haven't gone public because of the markets. I want to see some market activity. And I do know when there is, even if it doesn't have to do with your fields, what's really interesting about the markets, even if it's in tech, even if it's in health tech, even in whatever industries, when the market performs, it affects all of us down to vendor level, all of the things. It just does better. So that's what I'm hopeful for. Hopeful. Kate?
Do you want to go? All in.
So I guess two things. One, a really weird thing happened in this administration, which is good for founders, actually. This administration is largely VC-led, you guys. Yeah. So whether you like the political bias of either side, the VCs are in charge, which is wild. We've actually never before had that in this country. So that is actually pretty good for people who need money and are founding companies. Second, the biggest burden to any individual business is regulation. And so there are 22,000 regulations in the state of Texas on small businesses, 22,000. If we can decrease the amount of regulation, Lord knows FinTech knows this, then we can actually grow. It's incredibly difficult to grow in an environment where you have increasing regulatory burden, which is what's happened over the last cycle. So I think for a second, we got to put aside, do we like how people talk? And we have to ask ourselves, is this going to be good for my bank account? And I actually am extremely optimistic that if we ignore this and we watch the regulatory changes, this is a huge time to win.
And I'll just hard to watch this.
And
But let me just add, I just think, listen, we're moving forward, right? All we can do is put one step in front of the other and move forward, regardless of the noise. It's always going to be hard to build a business. But here's the thing. You don't have to focus on building $1 billion business. You can focus on building $1 million business, a $10 million, a $50 million business, a $200 million. I am watching women doing this every day, and they may not be on the covers of the magazines or getting the unicorn status. Who effing cares? If they are building great businesses for themselves, for their employees, for their communities, that is what matters.
You're here. Well, ladies, thank you so much.
Can we do something
Diana Madani, Cody Sanchez. Thank you.
We would love to do a selfie with all of you.
You guys want to be in a selfie with us? Show the next generation of women out there.
We're going to do a female founders meetup at 3 p.m. So be back here.
So back here at 3.
All right.
Ask some questions then.
You guys want to stand up and pretend like we're excited about this? I think so. All right, wait. You got to get in here. Get in. Okay, ready? And just why don't everybody put up your hands and say 1, 2, 3 vaginas. 1, 2, 3 vaginas.